Welcome to this fifth study session on Matthew's Gospel. Lord, please illumine your word through Matthew to us by your Holy Spirit. Amen. Hopefully we have read some or all of Matthew chapter 5 verse 1 to chapter 8 verse 1. In this session we're looking at the second part of Book 1, recording Jesus' discourse known to us as the Sermon on the Mount. The foundation of the kingdom of heaven is being established. Just a few parts of the sermon will be considered as we look at this together. This is a summary of the contents of the whole sermon, beginning in chapter 5 and going to the beginning of chapter 8. And for the moment, I would like to read verses 3 to 10 of chapter 5, and for you to just consider these as you hear them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These 8 statements, blessed are those who, for it is they who are amazing, aren't they? The first and last of the group have the same second clause, for it is to them that the kingdom of heaven belongs. Just a few thoughts to bring out. Verse 3, poor in spirit. This seems to refer to those who are broken-hearted because they sense that God is absent from their situation, but are waiting patiently for his appearing. Verse 4, those who mourn. This is a time of painful loss that will be transcended by the comfort of God, and probably has links with Isaiah chapter 61 and the suffering of the people of Israel in exile. Verse 5, lowly. This state of powerlessness and inability to forward one's own cause. Verse 6, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Someone conscious of the lack of a just social order that pleases God and who seeks or who desires to see that put to right. Verse 7, the merciful. So this is someone making provision for others despite the pressure of present circumstances. Pure in heart, verse 8, carries a sense of integrity. It's the opposite of deviousness. Verse 9, the peacemakers, they have this mode of response to hostility. And verse 10, persecuted for righteousness' sake. So it's faithfulness to God despite all kinds of pressure, as opposed to compromise or apostasy. So just take a moment to consider, how has the Lord spoken to you today through the Beatitudes? How are they relevant to your personal situation or the situation of your church? And what response is the Lord asking of you or of your church? So take some moments to consider. If you're in a group and would like to share some thoughts, please feel free to do that now. So I would like us to focus for a few minutes on Jesus' word pictures of salt and light. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Called to be salt and light then. Salt. Salt was very common in Jesus' day. It was also very valuable. Sometimes Roman soldiers were paid in salt, and if one of them was not performing his duties well, it was said that he was not worth his salt. Just like today, salt was used both to flavour food and to preserve food. Of course, in Jesus' day, there was no refrigeration. Fish caught in the Sea of Galilee was packed in salt and sent to market in Jerusalem. The salt kept the fish from spoiling. It acted as a preservative. This is one of the two images that Jesus is using here to describe true followers of his. They are the salt of the earth. They add distinctiveness to the flavour of life on earth, and they help to preserve human society. Distinctive flavouring then, preserving the good then. What does distinctive flavouring look like in the community of disciples? Well, according to Jesus in Mark chapter 9, verse 50, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. And according to Paul the Apostle in Colossians chapter 4, verse 6, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. These are powerful words about flavour. How do we flavour the lives of those around us? Well, I would like to suggest that Mark chapter 9, verse 50 is especially a challenge to introverts, to those who do their thinking internally. Internally, are you at peace with those around you in your church? Or are you judging them, condemning them? And I would suggest that Colossians 4, verse 6 is especially a challenge to extroverts, to those who do their thinking externally. Externally, verbally, are you full of grace with those around you, or do you push yourself, your perspective onto everyone else? Saltiness under the rulership of God brings beneficial influence to human relationships. It brings peace, grace, wisdom. It brings out a good flavour here on earth. Salt also preserves. It keeps precious things from spoiling. One commentator suggests that those who live under God's rulership act as a moral disinfectant in a world where moral standards are low, constantly changing or non-existent. How did the early church approach this preservative task? Our earliest Christian brothers and sisters lived in a society that was terribly corrupt, that was unjust, that condoned a morality that was far away from the biblical norm. The Apostle Paul's strategy in such a context was to sharpen up the salt. He challenged the new believers to live qualitatively different lives. Here, for example, is his brief for the Christians in Philippi. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault in a crooked and depraved generation. The word in a crooked and depraved generation. The word in literally means in the middle of, like salt rubbed into the meat. Tend to the salt in the middle of a crooked and depraved generation. When people generally think about the church or individual Christians, is this the first thought that comes into their minds? Oh, those are people who do not complain or argue. Salt only has its true effect, of course, for as long as it keeps its distinctive saltiness. If the saltiness leaches away, the salt becomes worthless. It no longer enhances taste. It no longer preserves anything. It's like one of those salt shakers with grains of rice in it that absorb the moisture. Picture the salt shaker where all the salt has been shaken out and only rice is left in the shaker. Such salt is useless. Throw it away with the rest of the rubbish. Actually, Jesus is saying more. He is saying that unsalty salt is a contradiction in terms. It's like saying, suppose that water loses its wetness. It's totally contradictory. An unsalty salt loses its taste. Literally, in the Greek text, becomes foolish. And the Greek word is the word from which we get the English word moron. The world doesn't need more morons. It needs some spicy wisdom. That is our calling, to provide that spicy wisdom. With his light metaphor, Jesus conjures up a couple of scenes, one panoramic and one domestic. The panoramic picture is a city on a hill. It's centrifugal, it is large screen. All the lights of a city situated on a hill have a huge visible effect in the night sky. This is about the collective light of the whole believing community influencing the world in which it is set. Perhaps somewhere in the back of Jesus' mind is the thought of contrast with the Qumran sect. The followers of the Qumran sect called themselves the Sons of Light, but they hid themselves away in enclosed communities. Jesus is challenging his followers collectively to make a difference. The other light picture that Jesus conjures up is domestic. The lamp on its stand picture is an indoors picture. It is centripetal. It is small screen, a shallow bowl of oil with a wick. But it is highly effective within its context. It gives light to everyone in the house, verse 15. Local light brings the gospel home. Mark records it like this. Do you bring in a lamp to put it under a bowl or a bed? Instead, don't you put it on its stand? For whatever is hidden is meant to be brought out into the open. Is that the effect we have on people just by being who we are, where we are? For the rest of this session, we're going to focus on part of the material labelled 6 Antitheses here. Chapter 5, verses 21 to 48. Antitheses, or opposites. 6 times in these verses, there's a pattern of speech that Jesus uses. You have heard, but I tell you. And you can see the verses, the groups of verses that illustrate this. You have heard, but I tell you. We're going to look at the 5th time Jesus uses this pattern of speech. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. These are tough words by anyone's standard and easy to misunderstand. You could come away from them thinking, well, I mustn't resist someone who is evil. I must just let him or her walk all over me. Having concern for my own justice is not spiritual or godly. If my partner or employer batters me or abuses me, then the Christian thing to do is to turn the other cheek and let myself be battered there too. Isn't it true that many of us do read or receive these verses in that kind of way? I mustn't defend myself. I must allow myself to be abused. Jesus sets up this antithesis or opposite by announcing, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Verse 38. This saying or slogan had become part of Jewish culture. It was produced by extracting some words from Exodus chapter 21 verse 24, Leviticus chapter 4 verse 20, and Deuteronomy 19 verse 21. It formed a quip, that summarized how the people of Israel were going to handle bad things done to them by others. Give them back what they give you, or rather, take away from them what they've taken away from you, an eye or a tooth. Jesus quotes the common slogan and then suggests in its place a different slogan. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Dump the old slogan, go for my new slogan. But the issue is, what does the new slogan mean? Well, let us bear in mind that Jesus himself is a person who always resisted evil with every fibre of his being, wherever he found it. So could he be meaning here, don't stand up to evil, full stop? I don't think so. Moreover, the Greek word used here for resist carries a more nuanced sense than the English. The Greek word for resist is antistenai, which is composed of anti plus stenai. Anti means against, stenai means to stand. The Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, known as the Septuagint, uses this word to describe two armies that march up against each other and collide. They take a forward stance against each other. The question for us here, in Jesus' use of this word, is he emphasizing the against bit or the stand bit? Is he saying, don't do anything against evil? Or is he saying, don't go up against evil in the army kind of way? My conclusion is he's actually saying the latter. Don't go up against evil in the army kind of way. And I say that because of the examples he immediately gives to illustrate his new slogan. There are 3 examples, and we'll look at each of them. Example 1. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Why does Jesus define which cheek it is? Why does he say right cheek? Have a think about it. We are talking right-handed culture here. Left hands are used for unclean tasks. Right hands are used for everything else. So what is in Jesus' mind here? If a right-handed person is going to land a heavy punch on someone else's face, which cheek would he hit? The left cheek. Jesus defines the recipient cheek here as the right cheek. So what kind of a blow is that? It is a back-handed blow, a blow from the back of the hand. And what is that about? Well, it is a blow that is symbolic. It is not intended to injure, it is intended to humiliate. It is intended to put the lesser person back where they belong. It is a swipe that is always given from a position of power or superiority. The back of the hand was given by a master to a slave, or by a husband to a wife, or by a parent to a child, even by a Roman to a Jew. It's an idea not totally remote from my own family. I remember in my childhood being told to watch out unless you want to feel the back of your father's hand. Jesus is saying here, when someone tries to humiliate you or put you down, don't stand up against them, but step back into your place within that culture, your inferior place, and from there, turn the other cheek. If you turn the other cheek, if you move your head from left to right, you can't be backhanded again. Your nose gets in the way. By turning the other cheek, you are declaring to the bully, you have made use of your superior place in our society to hit me, but I refuse to be further humiliated by you. In other words, okay, you may have the right in society to hurt me, damage me, kill me even, but I am saying to you that you can't put me down, even if you have me killed. I am a somebody. I am a person just like you. I do have dignity. Something like that, it seems to me, is what is going on here in this turning the other cheek instance. Within that society's cultural norms, Jesus was saying yes to the against bit, but no to the standing against evil bit. Verse 40, if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. Probably more accurately translated as, If anyone takes you to court and sues you for your outer garment, give him your undergarment as well. What's this about? Well, it is most likely about collateral for a loan. If a person was trying to get a loan, normally they would put up animals or land as collateral for the loan. The very poorest of the poor, however, could use their outer garment as collateral, according to Deuteronomy chapter 24. This outer garment was a long cloak that was used as an overcoat by day and as a sort of sleeping bag at night. The creditor had to return the outer garment every evening, but he could then come and get it next morning in order to harass the person into repaying the loan. In Jesus' audience would have been people who knew what this meant personally. They knew what it meant to be poor and in debt. They lived hand to mouth and resorted to loans for crises in their lives. And they knew that the loan system worked for the wealthy, for the creditor. So Jesus is saying to such people, okay, the whole system is set up against you. You're only where you are because you are poor. You're never going to win your case in court. But listen, when your moment in court comes, why not show them how absurd the whole system is? The creditor is suing you for your outer garment. Take off your inner garment also and put that in his arms. Result, you're left standing there naked in the courtroom, and the creditor and everyone else is shamed by the nakedness enforced upon you. The whole court will be affronted. It simply isn't the done thing to have a person walking naked out of the court saying, oh, my creditor has got all my clothes. What kind of justice is that? What kind of society allows that to happen? It's going to be a long time before that creditor sues someone else for their outer garment. Again, I think, Jesus is arguing for the against evil bit, but finding a much more subtle way to do that against bit. His third example, if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles, verse 41. This is about how to live when you find yourself under occupation and subject to the military might of Rome. If one of the occupation troops forces you to carry his pack for 1 mile, carry it for 2. These packs weighed anywhere from 65 to 85 pounds, not counting weapons. If trouble broke out in the region, the soldiers had to move quickly to the trouble spot. Military law allowed a soldier to grab a civilian and force that civilian to carry his pack, but only for 1 mile. Mile markers existed along every Roman road. If the civilian were forced to carry the pack more than 1 mile, the soldier was in breach of military code and in trouble. So Jesus is saying, all right, next time a soldier forces you to carry his pack, cooperate. Carry it, and when you come to the mile marker, keep going. For the soldier, such a situation will put him completely out of his depth. Instead of the civilian reaching the mile marker and dumping the pack, the person walks on. Now what's going to happen? This is a different kind of civilian. What's motivating him? And help, I'm now in contravention of military law. Hey, you civilian, stop, put my pack down. The initiative has disappeared from the oppressor, from the occupying force, and is in the hands of the oppressed, the weak, the powerless. This is resisting. This is against stuff, but it's not upfront army to army kind of stance taking. What Jesus is articulating here is a way of living in the world, a world dominated by those with status and wealth and military power, with resistance to evil, yet without succumbing to violence. He is dreaming up humorous ways of overcoming domination in all its forms by using means that will not create new forms of violence. Our human reaction to violence tends to lead us to one of two choices. Either we don't resist it at all, or we resist it on its own terms. Here, Jesus is offering another possibility. He is not calling on people to be non-resistant. He is calling on them to be non-violent. It is a key to the kingdom of heaven that Gandhi evidently got hold of from his reading of the Gospels. He said, everyone in the world knows that Jesus and his teaching is non-violent, except Christians. Similarly, Martin Luther King, of course, in the American Civil Rights Movement. In a speech in 1958, he declared, "Hate begets hate, violence begets violence, toughness begets a greater toughness. We must meet the forces of hate with the power of love." In Jesus' own life, whether he was dealing with infiltrating evil spirits, the scourge of blindness or leprosy, the faithless money changing going on in the temple courts, or the power-aware scribes and Pharisees and chief priests, Jesus opposed, resisted, stood against evil. The overturning of the tables in the temple courts was the closest he came to any violent act. Overwhelmingly, he used jokes, stories, healings, exorcisms, miracles, silence to stand against evil. Even though the powerful people slapped his cheek and took away his life, his became the last word in resurrection from death. It was the seemingly weak, crucified Lord who disarmed principalities and powers, broke through death, and is raised and ascended and seated. He will be the judge of all. Well, we have had a taster of the foundation of the kingdom being established, especially via Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. Here's a pause for thought. Reflect on, and if you're part of a group, feel free to share your responses to these questions. Where have you felt that you needed to resist evil or cruelty or the abuse of position? How did you go about it? And what did you learn in the process? Or a second question, can you share some good examples of Christians or churches functioning well as salt and light? In any sharing on these pause for thought, please agree in a group to keep what's discussed, what's shared, confidential. Thank you. We have looked at some of the narrative and the discourse in Book 1. Now we move on to look at part of Book 2 with its focus on the mission of the kingdom. In preparation for that, it would be great if you could read Matthew chapter 9 verse 35 to chapter 11 verse 1. We'll be looking at that in the next session. For now, let us pray together. Father, this Sermon on the Mount, so provocative and so evocative and so penetrating of our souls, and we feel so far from being true disciples of Jesus. We pray you would help us to grasp what it means to put ourselves in a place to be truly blessed, and help us to gather from Jesus' illustrations of what it means to be salt and light in society, and what it means to be seekers of righteousness and opposers of injustice, and yet non-violent. There's so much here, Father, that we aspire to, but fail so much in trying to achieve. Have mercy on us and renew us to become more like our Master for his name's sake. Amen. I hope to see you next time, but for now, farewell.